it now. All right. No, I don't know. Okie dokie. So here we are, another Parsha. This is Parsha Behar. And let's look at Vayikra 25, 1 through 7. So the Torah portion is given the name Behar, meaning in Mount, as opposed to on Mount, and we would say in Mount Sinai, as opposed to on Mount Sinai. And we're going to take a look at why this is an important thing for us to look at. The Torah portion we're going to cover is one that people ask me about all the time. Is, well, we're going to plant our fields for 6 years, and on the 7th year we're not going to plant anything. And I said, yeah, that's good. It'll, let your land rest. This is a commandment that's specific to the land of Israel, but you want to do it here, hey, more power to you. But there's a lot more meaning in what we learn from this Torah portion than just agriculture. So it's something we're going to look at. But let's talk to our Elohim, and then we'll take a look at this Torah portion. Master Yahuwah, we thank you for this time together. We ask that you will open our eyes, open our ears, and open our hearts so that we can see, hear, and understand what your word and your spirit tells us. We thank you for it. In the name of Yahshua. Amen. All right. So this is one of those Torah portions, like most other Torah portions, that starts with what we would otherwise look at as an insignificant phrase. It says, "And Yahuwah spoke to Moses in Mount Sinai, saying," and we always think of, well, Moses was on Mount Sinai, so why does it say in Mount Sinai? And the verse begins with Vaydabar, which means and spoke. And now we've learned that daber means proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises. These are spoken by Yahuwah, whose name means existence in everything at every time. So we can consider this as a very important idea. The proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah are always present in our existence. Now, before we look at anything else, most of us are probably thinking at this time, I already know this. We've talked about this a dozen times. But it's an appropriate defensive thought for us to take. I already know this. Tell me something I don't know, right? We say the proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah are always present in our existence. Should we actually, though, be asking a question? Do I realize this? Say yes. I can go back over all my Torah notes and I can understand that we've talked about this umpteen dozen times. But do I realize that the proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah are always present in my life? Regardless of where I am, regardless of where I'm doing, they apply. Regardless of where I am, regardless of where I'm doing, Yahuwah is present. So, yes, I can say, I already know this. The thing that we've got to get into a habit of is realizing that this is the fact, that I'm always in the presence of Yahuwah, and that His Torah always applies at every moment of my life. So there's a question there. So as this Torah portion will always come up during the Omer count, we're probably always going to hit Vayikra 25, 1 through 7 during the counting of the Omer. It's truly a valid question. And if we were to take the time to sit down and truly ponder this question, I would believe that we would be shocked to find that we don't really realize this. And if we're honest with each other, we probably don't sit down and realize the fact that He's always present and the word always applies. Because we get busy, as we're going to see in just a minute, planting our fields and pruning our vineyards. So, the word for to in this verse is El. Now, we've also learned that El means towards or against. So it is towards or against Moshe that as a name means to draw out. But before we formulate any kind of an idea, let's consider the word Behar, that's the word that's used to name our Torah portion. That means in Mount. Now this word is telling us that we are in Mount Sinai and not on Mount Sinai, which is a word for thorny. Sinai means thorns. It means thistles. It means those little prickly things that you prick your fingers on when you go to get the pretty rose. Okay? So it means thorny. And we'll come back to that in a second. For now, let's consider Behar meaning in Mount. The root of Behar is the word har, that means a hill or a mountain. And this kind of gives us a topical idea of where it's at. It's on the mountain of Sinai. But what does this mean is a question that we have to ask. We consider the Proto-Hebrew, the Paleo-Hebrew of this word that shows us in the hay, we have a person with their hands up in the air, like they're looking at something in amazement. They're paying attention. They're trying to get a grasp of what's coming. And then we have the head, which represents authority. So this idea from the Proto-Hebrew tells us paying attention to something greater than we are that has the authority. So this is something to consider, but why the letter bet that means in? Why not use the lamed that means in the direction of or something? Why the letter bet that means in? So we learned that Sinai meant thorns, thistles, little sharp pointy things that we find in the garden. And in considering this, we have to look at what Yahuwah Elohim told the Adam after the transgression regarding the soil that he would be working. Yahuwah said at Bereshit 3:18, "Thorns and also thistles shall it bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field." So what's always going to be there? Thorns and thistles. We find ourselves in the presence or in the midst of thorns and thistles trying to behold something greater than we are. You see where we're going? Now, have you ever wondered why the instruction of Yahuwah Elohim was given in a place called thorns and thistles? Why did he give the Torah at Sinai? Why not find some other place with a nicer name that made sense? Before going any further, ask yourself this. Am I working around or in any proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah that are always present in my existence? So we ask, what was your response? Your immediate response. Was your immediate response, I already know this? Or was your immediate response, do I realize this? Oh, did I? Oh. Okay, did I not say, am I working around? Oh, am I working around any thorns? There we go. So before you consider this, see, I gave away the answer. So, what was your response to that statement? Was it, I already know this? Or was your response to that statement, do I realize this? And it's Judges. Where are you? Where are we? Where are we growing? And then we turn the page. Make sure I don't miss any pages. I told you that was too much of that in the glass. So let's take all this and formulate a single idea. The proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah are always present in our existence. We must be able to draw them out while being in the thorns. We must be able to pay attention to something greater than we are that has authority over us. Now, we have to be able to pay attention to what the Torah is telling us in the midst of all the thorns in our lives. And it's a lot easier, I'm probably jumping ahead, but it's a lot easier to go to guns and depend on what I can do as opposed to stop and say, Elohim, what should I do? And I'm going to wait until you give me a response. Now, when you're cruising down the road at 70 miles an hour and somebody pulls out in front of you, listen to what the Ruach tells you right then and there and get out of the way. But there are some things that we can wait, but we're impatient. We want to go to guns and get our answer now, even if it means that we make up the answer and say, well, Elohim told me. Yeah. How many times do we hear, the Holy Spirit told me such and such and so and so? Anyway, there we go. So we consider the source of this authority in the last word of this verse, that is le'emor, that means saying. Now we learn that this word means more than just to say, it means to say from the heart. Then it's Yahuwah that's speaking, so Yahuwah speaks from his heart, he speaks from his Torah. It is, as we have just learned, our own objections that get in the way. We make statements like, I already know this, when we should ask questions, do I realize this? It is for this very reason that we must grasp what the Torah portion is going to teach us in the following Sitra. When I say Sitra, it's a piece of the Torah portion. You'll notice at the end of this, in the Hebrew and in the English, there's a little S in parentheses, just telling us this is a little piece of the entire Parsha. If it was the end of the Parsha, there'd be a little P there to say, hey, this is the end of the Torah portion. So, just the little marker thingies. But these are questions, and we would be amazed at how important it is for us to ask the right questions. Now, I'm going to teach at the Bible Institute thingy in the morning, and they're studying Jeremiah, which I could say means that Elohim strengthens, or I could say Elohim gives strength. Do they mean the same thing? Do they? I say, Elohim, give me strength to overcome this situation. Something that we should never pray, because Elohim will exercise us until we have the strength to overcome. But I can say, Elohim, give me strength. Or I can say, Elohim, strengthen me to go forward in tackling what I'm about to do. There's a difference in that one, I'm asking for strength to not get beat up, but the other one, I'm asking for strength so that I can go and do the beating. Does that make sense? So, we have to understand what to ask, how to look at Scripture. How am I perceiving what I see? So anyway, this takes us on to the next verse, where Yahuwah is speaking to Moshe, and he says, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, then shall the land observe a Sabbath to Yahuwah. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time tearing this verse into itty-bitty pieces. We can kind of go pseudo-topically and get some understanding. The children of Israel, as we have learned, represents those who have established that Elohim is greater than they are. When we read about the land or the earth in Torah or in the Bible, it's usually a representation of either us or our lives. What we plant is what our lives yield. This verse says that we are to observe a Sabbath to Yahuwah when we come into the land that Yahuwah, our Elohim, is giving us. Now, Shabbat. Shabbat means to rest, to put away work, and or to desist from exertion. Stop digging in the thorns, in other words, to find fruit. Shabbat is to be observed. Comes from the word veshavta, that comes or finds its root in the word Shabbat. So we are not being told just once, but here we're being told twice to put away work or to desist from exertion. So how many witnesses does it take to bring conviction? It takes 2 witnesses. Here we're being told 2 times to stop, 2 times to rest. So this is something that is very important to Elohim. Now, this is to be done in the direction of Yahuwah. And it says, La Yahuwah. So we have learned that the Lamed means to learn and to receive guidance. Then we can consider that we are to rest, to put away work, and or to desist from exertion in order to learn from and be led by Yahuwah. In this we are able to recognize the proclamations, declarations, commandments, promises of Yahuwah, that they are always present in our existence. We must be able to draw them out while being in the thorn. We must be able to pay attention to something greater than we are that has authority over us. So if we understand that, then we can move on to the next verse, which is the one that gets everybody all discombobulated. Oh, I can't plant anything in my garden because we're going into the 7th year. It's the 6th year. I've got to let the land rest. But we can't be waiting 6 years at a time to apply instruction to our lives. This is something that applies to us every day. Not the whole digging up the garden, and the concepts found within this apply to us every day. This verse 3 says, 6 years shall you sow your field, and 6 years shall you prune your vineyard or trim your vineyard, and gather in the produce of it. So, before we look at the verse itself, let's consider the idea of your. It says, your field, your vineyard. This word is possessive. What we talked about in this verse belongs to you. And it depends on what you do with it, and what happens to it depends on you. So with this in mind, let's consider that 6 is a representation of our carnal being. This verse is referring to our flesh and blood existence. We only get one of those, and we have to get it right. And we say, and we've said in the past, and we have to keep this constantly in mind, that our lifetime is the time that we have to build our relationship with Yahuwah Elohim. Once we're dead, it's too late. There's no building a relationship. Either he's going to say, come on in, or he's going to say, depart from me. I don't know where you are. I don't know you. So we have our lifetime to get our relationship straight, right? Something important to hold on to. We only get one of these, and we have to get it right. Now, the word for years in this verse is shanim, that comes from the root shana, that not only means a year, but it also means to alter or to change. The word for sow is tizra, that means to scatter seed and to produce seed. So if we consider the letters of tizra that make up this word, we can consider that we scatter seed and produce seed according to our being able to, and then we break this word down and we read this word like a sentence. There's the ayin, that we have to be able to perceive the resh, we have to perceive the authority in the Zion, the protection, the nourishment, and the rest that's found in the word of the covenant. I left out the word there, but it's in the word of the covenant. We have to be able to perceive it. We have to understand that inside the covers of this little book, and many other books that were left out because either the rabbis felt they weren't important enough or the church fathers felt they weren't important enough, that we find instruction within the pages of this book, specifically the first 5 books, because that's where the bulk of the instruction lies. The rest of it is commentary. And that kind of upsets some people, and it kind of freaks some people out. But I say, we have the Torah, and everything else is commentary. It comments on the Torah. We can't understand what the prophets have to tell us if we don't understand what the Torah says. A lot of what David talks about, we don't understand if we don't understand the Torah. And certainly we can't understand what Yahshua was talking about if we don't understand the Torah. He mentions the prophets, but we have to understand the Torah to understand those. When Paul said all Scripture is inspired by Elohim, is breathed by Elohim, he wasn't talking about the little pocket-sized Gideon's New Testament that he'd picked up at the local Jerusalem hotel. He was talking about the Torah. He was talking about the prophets and the writings. So, very important that we understand this, that we perceive the authority and the protection, nourishment, and rest that's found in the Word of the Covenant. This is where we all, if we are truly honest with ourselves, and we have to be honest with ourselves, this is where we all hit a brick wall. We don't always perceive the Word of Elohim. We're too busy in our day-to-day. If we take your and we subtract the why, we come up with our. Then it's our day, our field, our vineyard. It's all about us. When we take out the why, we take out the yod, we remove the truth, power, and the ability of Yahuwah Elohim from our perception. So, this poses a series of questions that we can ask ourselves, or actually this poses a question at this point, and then we'll have some more questions in a minute. What is the quality of the seed that I'm scattering, and what is the quality of the seed that I'm producing? What is the quality of the seed that I'm putting out? And what is the quality of the seed that I'm producing? Because I put out seed, I bear fruit, and then I take the seeds out of that fruit that I bear to get the seeds that I've produced. What's the quality of the fruit that I'm bearing to get the seeds from? So it's an honest question. What is my life affecting? If I'm affecting things without Elohim in my life, what is that fruit going to be? As opposed to affecting change with Yahuwah Elohim as the one that is supporting me, nourishing me, guiding me, leading me, teaching me, nourishing me. So we are putting this seed into our fields that's represented by the word sedecha, means our fields, from the root sedah, that means a cultivated field, but it also means a field of beasts, a field that feeds the beasts. Now, the beasts of the field, when we read about cattle and we read about beasts, they're a type for, or they are a representation of a type of person with an inability to learn, and as such, an inability to apply learning. We say behemah refers to a dumb animal that is carried by 4 feet, that walks on 4 feet. So, what is a dumb animal that's carried by 4? What does 4 represent to us? It represents the Dalit, that represents spiritual poverty. So this is somebody that is incapable. Maybe incapable is not a good word, because if I say that person's incapable, then I'm breaking the first 3 commandments. But this person is the difficult case because they won't easily take in the word of Elohim because they're carried by that spiritual poverty. They're supported by it. So in this, our field, it can either mean our field that we're cultivating or our field that has these spiritually poor individuals in it. What are we going to do with that? The beast of the field, okay, we've already talked about that one. So from this first phrase of this verse that says, 6 years shall you grow your field, now we can we can formulate a series of questions that we ask. What is the quality of seed that I'm scattering, and what is the quality of the seed that I'm producing was the first question. Am I cultivating my own field, or am I simply feeding the beasts that reside there? Am I taking the time along the way to perceive the authority and the protection, nourishment, and rest that is found in the covenant? Have I taken the perception of the truth, power, and the ability of Yahweh Elohim out of my perception? And finally, having honestly considered all of these questions, what has changed in me, and what changes do I need to make during my physical existence? Remember, 6 years. 6 represents the physical. Years from the word shana means not only a year, but it means to change or to alter. What do I need to change? We're in the Omer count. We only have a few days left, like 20-something days left. I lost track. So, what do I need to change? Because when we finish with the Omer, we go into Shavuot, but we immediately go into a time of more self-reflection, because we're coming up to Yom Teruah to ask, have I paid attention to the voice in the shofar? Then we come to Yom Kippur, that's about asking ourselves, where am I? What do I need to change? Because the next thing that comes is Sukkot. And Sukkot is a representation of the world to come. Now, this is something that repeats itself every year. It's a practice for us. A practice for us to take into account all of these things during our life, because we say time is helical. It's like that little screw that we're screwing into the wall, but eventually there's no more threads. Eventually, the helical time is going to stop. And the drill's going to be over, and the real world to come is going to be here. So we ask questions. We look at ourselves. Where am I? So, anyway, so we move on. This will take us to the next phrase that says, and 6 years shall you prune your vineyard. This verse produces the same questions, but in reference to pruning the vineyard, this is the fruit that the scattering of the seeds produces. This is the fruit that the scattering of the seeds produces. Now, before we go on, I could take and put that little story from Yahshua into this thing, that the sower went along the way and he dropped seeds out, and some landed in the thorns and the thistles, and some landed on the road, and some landed on the rocks, and some landed into the good soil. So that's a story to keep in mind, but we're talking about pruning the thing now. The word for pruning is tizmor, meaning to prune or to trim. And the root of tizmor is samar, which is one of the roots that means to stand erect or to stand upright. And it has another root, zamar, that means to sing praise. The word for your vineyard is karmecha, that aside from vineyard also means to increase. So we can formulate an idea that in taking care to trim our vineyard, to cut out the thorns and the thistles by asking the questions that we formulated earlier, once we have removed the thorns and the thistles, we can be upright and praise our Elohim as we are walking in his instruction and guidance. The change in our physical existence is increase. And in the balance of this phrase, it starts to make sense that it says, gather in the produce of it. When we take time to perceive that Yahuwah is always present in our lives, then we learn to depend on his truth, power, and ability to lead us. Then we produce fruit. The word for gather is ve'asafta, that aside from gather means to receive. The word for produce is tebuata, that from its fruit, tebua means to increase. It also means fruit, but it means to increase. So if we look at the Hebrews of this verse, or the Hebrew of this verse, we see that the word that precedes this word for increase, the one that precedes tebuatah,